Shrimping is a dying institution because of the cost of fuel, the cost of boat, and the lack of income as a result of the shrimp.
Right now, the only assets that a shrimp fisherman has is his or her shrimp boat. Because of the market situation, the value of those boats is low as it's ever been.
By value, the commercial shrimp industry is the largest fishery in Louisiana. In 2007, approximately 114 million pounds of shrimp were harvested with a dockside value of about $145 million.
It's in your blood. If it's in your blood, you gotta love it and you can't quit.
We could have gotten something else. We would have made more money than shrimping, but we were satisfied with what we was doing.
Everybody I know that left shrimping and is doing something else, they all want to come back. People down here better look at that and figure out what they're going to do. First of all, you get your ball of twine and you fill up your needles. This is our way we do that. You got to put a lot of twine, to go through that webbing, And then we just fill them up. You hang your nets to the rope with them and you sew them, So that's how we start. Then you got to get your twine and start cutting out your pattern. Cutting out your top piece, the top of your net. You got to cut your bottom of your net, and you got to cut your wings. You seam it together like this, You put it together. And you got your top of your trawl cut out. Then you got your wings. You got your two wings, your side panels, You sew that in. And what I'm getting ready to do, I'm getting ready to put my bottom to my trawl, and then the trawl is gonna come out the way it's supposed to be made. The way it started, this is like a little plywood board, a little trawl board. You gotta know the measurements to bust them and all, You gotta have a little crack in the boards, And this one right here doesn't have the iron on it yet. The little sled there where it's gonna be pushing the chain, We're losing our heritage because our shrimping is going downhill so bad. You know, people don't realize how bad we're losing our business. We are losing it. I want my little boy to go trawling one day. I would love to see him go make a living like I did. I had a good living. Shrimping was a good living to me. You know, I couldn't see no other living I would have wanted to do because I never really did nothing else I wanted to do. It was a good life. It always was a good life. It's just...
In the early days, the shrimp industry was strictly local. There was no freezing. Ice was not readily abundant on the areas where the shrimp abounded. And Barataria Bay was a prime area for shrimp. And he used seines. He'd walk out from the shore with the seines and make a circle and then close it in and pull them up. And eventually the seines became much bigger. And you used a canotte, which was an Italian-type workboat, 15 to maybe 25 feet long, with a sail. At about the time of World War I, they began to use engines in boats. So they were now motorized boats. And the old canotte, which was a sailing vessel, you took essentially the same boat. You mounted an engine to the rear where you had a short drive shaft to the propeller. And you built some sort of cabin in the front. And it served as a boat for fishermen, for hunters, for trappers, sort of a multi-purpose boat.
The real transformation of shrimping as a cultural activity of South Louisiana is going to come around 1881, when we have the importation of Chinese into South Louisiana. The Chinese are going to bring the shrimp drying industry to the Acadians. They would have these huge platforms. They would cook the shrimp, and then they dump it on these platforms, and the women would come through there. They dance the shrimp dance, where they would kick the shrimp around with their bare feet. And these platforms are DNA gumbos. I mean, you had every ethnic group that you could think of there. These were Acadians who came in, who were individuals who were looking for a lifestyle that allowed them to provide income from their families. It's a seasonal type of work. It's something that they were accustomed to in Nova Scotia because they were trappers. They were nomadic. They followed the fur. But now they could follow the shrimp, and as a consequence, the area was now able to have shrimp year-round. And there was very little movement from these shrimp platforms, say, up the bayou. And that's one of the things that characterizes South Louisiana, is that nobody moves. It's a tradition, but it's a tradition that's forced on you by virtue of the fact that nobody moves from this area. 80% of the people who live south of Interstate 10 are born there. And so down the bayou, this tradition is manifest as sort of, I was born into the shrimping industry. And it's passed, it's a generational type of occupation, from grandfather to grandson.
My dad was a shrimper when I was in school. I used to go with him every summer on school vacation. And I guess from about the age of 12 or 13, I'd go with him every summer. And once I graduated high school, I just jumped on the boat with him and continued onward. Back then, I was just for the fun. It was a blast to be on the boat, working with my dad, playing with the crabs and the shrimp, and it was just fun to be on the water, you know.
Grandpa's an oysterman on one side. My other grandpa was a fisherman and a trapper. But my father-in-law, I came to work for my father-in-law over 25 years ago, and I went trawling, and I fell in love with it.
Kept telling Dad I didn't want to go to school no more. He said, well, he said, when school's finished, he said, I'm going to bring you trolling. And his idea was to make it rough on me, which he did. I was on the back deck, I was the deckhand. He said, well, what you want to be now? You want to go to school or be a shrimper? I said, I want to be a shrimper.
My husband has family that was in this business that have been for generations. He's actually the 4th generation. My son that was working here is 5th generation. Although he won't stay in the business, he'll actually go on to college and do something different.
I'd go in the summer, me, my dad, and my oldest brother was working with my dad, and the whole family, we all had to go shrimping. We go work for our school clothes. That was the thing. And it was a family thing. We work here and we go to Mississippi. My dad used to like to troll Mississippi in the summer, and we was all on the boat.
I was born in the shrimp dock. My daddy had one, my grandfather had one. When I was a little kid, instead of putting me in one of those little playpens that for kids, they used to put me in a shrimp box. I got pictures of being in a shrimp box as an infant, you know. But I've been doing this all my life, and this is my life. This is what I do 7 days a week, 18 hours a day.
I quit school in 5th grade, and then I went shrimping in the area with other guys, you know, as they had. And then we got to where we built a boat, me and him.
I started running a boat for my daddy at age 12. How you learn that?
Can't get away from it. Can't get away from it. Once you do this for a living, it's something hard for you to go on another job. And every time that shrimp season rolls around, think, man, if I bet you they over here and just want to catch the shrimp, you know. And that's when they say it's in your blood. If it's in your blood, you gotta love it and you can't quit.
It's in the blood. We've been doing this all our life. And we used to enjoy it. It was a challenge for us. We used to go out and fish, and it was like competition among each other, you know, at the boats and all.
It's in your blood, you know. I come to work every day because I love this business. I don't come here to make money. I could do something else. I could sell this. I've turned down a lot of money for this place. The property's worth a lot of money in Grand Isle. I could get out. I could go do something else. But, you know, they say it gets in your blood for some reason, you know. And once it gets in your blood, it's hard to get out.
It's like Captain Stevens said, I guess we had it in the blood, you know.
You wanted to go shrimping?
Hey, we could have gotten something else. We would have made more money than shrimping. But we were satisfied with what we was doing.
I tell my crew all the time, it says you gotta love it. If you don't love it, you can't do it, because it's not about the money. Sometimes we do great, but boy, we got some lean times. We got more lean times than good times.
We were born before the wind, also younger than the sun. Yeah, the bonnie boat was one as we sail into the mystic. I can now hear the sailors cry, smell the sea and feel the sky. Let your soul and spirit fly into the mystic. Where that foghorn blows, I will be coming home. Yeah, when the foghorn blows, I wanna hear it. I don't have to fear it, and I wanna rock your gypsy soul, just like way back in the days of old. Yeah, magnificently we will fold into the mystic. Too late to stop
The Department of Wildlife and Fisheries has been monitoring shrimp populations since 1967. We have 7 coastal study areas across the coast. Hundreds of 16-foot trawl and 6-foot trawl samples are taken every year. Shrimp data from these trawl samples are used to set and close our inshore and offshore shrimp seasons. In addition, we also work up all the other species that are collected in the trawl samples. There are 2 primary inshore shrimp seasons in Louisiana. The first is the spring season, which generally runs from May through June, that targets brown shrimp. The second inshore season targets white shrimp and runs from August through December. The Wildlife and Fisheries Commission meets the first Thursday in May to get input from the biologists concerning shrimp size and growth, and from the shrimping industry concerning any socioeconomic factors that may come into play to set the opening of the shrimp season. We use data that's collected the last week of April, and then we project ahead using known growth rates to project a date where 50% of the shrimp population will be of harvestable size. The Wildlife and Fisheries Commission then takes the biological recommendations coupled with input from the industry concerning any socioeconomic factors and then sets the opening date.
We work with the weather and with the moon. That's how we work. If you don't have no weather, we need the moon to get the tide flowing to make shrimp move. And if you got, you know, the weather to make shrimp move, it's good, you know, with southeast winds, stuff like that. But the thing is, with the weather for the shrimp to grow, you need a certain kind of climate. And if you don't have that, the shrimp ain't gonna grow. It's gonna stay a certain size.
You pay attention to the wind conditions a lot. Like if it's blowing a certain direction, you want to be at a certain place. If it's blowing excessively, you want to be where the water doesn't get quite dirty quite as fast. And you always want pretty much some cloudy water. The clearer the water, the less shrimp you'll catch, or it'll go to nighttime strictly.
In our time, you wouldn't look at no moon or no tide.
We didn't know nothing about
now
the moon.
You got to look at that moon and what the tide is going to be. If you got a 2-foot tide, that's the time you got to be out there. From 1 foot to 2 foot, you got to be out there.
When the moon comes around, like 3 days before the moon or 3 days after the moon, you got a tide that starts, you know, falling. The tide's at a certain depth and it starts moving like 1/10 of a foot to a foot. The stronger the tide gets, it kind of hurt us till when it gets on the backside of the moon, starts slowing down, it moves that shrimp out and everything settles down and the bottle settles down and you catch shrimp.
It's all what you've learned. You're chasing a creature you don't see. That's what people don't understand. So you got to know where to get them, when to get them. The boat's got to operate, your nets have to operate, and most important, you have to have a good crew.
Well, there's a number of shrimp species that occur in estuarine and offshore waters in Louisiana, but the primary species that most people are concerned with are your commercial species. These include white shrimp, brown shrimp, and sea bobs, and to a less extent, pink shrimp and rock shrimp. The most abundant commercial species is white shrimp, which produces about 60% of the state's landings, followed by brown shrimp, which generally has close to 40% of state's landings.
This is the white shrimp and this is the brown shrimp. And the quickest way to tell them apart is to look along the rostrum, which is that right there. The brown shrimp have a groove along the rostrum, and the white shrimp is smooth. Also, the antenna length is much longer on the white shrimp, and even though it's something that most biologists try not to do, and that's look at color, you can see that on the telson. The brown shrimp is tipped in red, where the white shrimp is tipped in a iridescent green.
The shrimp is like hamburger to everybody. I mean, they eat them. You know, if you want to go fishing, what do most people want to do these days? Get a live shrimp so they can catch fish.
It's what we do, it's what we live. It's kind of like having salt water in your veins. My husband would not be happy doing anything else, and it's why I chose to fight and make sure that we have an industry left. So we change, we adapt, we move on. As far as I know, each state has a distinctive flavor in their shrimp. In your Texas shrimp, you have more iodine. Your Louisiana shrimp is a sweet, tender shrimp on the smaller side. I'm not sure what Mississippi's is. I know Georgia's it's supposed to be real sweet in taste. Ours is our estuary. Our estuary plays into a big part of it, and it's kind of where your texture, your taste all comes from. They grow up in that estuary, is what I'm told.
Of what this boat has in stock is going to be brought to processors, and they're going to take this shrimp and they're going to defrost it, and they're going to run it through peeling machines, the way they take all of the shell and all of the heads off, and they're going to come out with nothing but strictly peeled meat. And then that's all put in 5-pound boxes and sold all over the United States. And that's where the bulk of the shrimp is going. When we say 31, 35, the shrimp count between 31 and 35 shrimp to the pound. These shrimp right here, because they're a smaller size, I know for a fact these 2 pallets are going to be sold as bait. So we're going to feed fish with these. Yeah.
If you look at what happened, FDA allowed all the shrimp in here that the EU banned due to chemical substances being on it that were harmful to humans. America ate all that shrimp. So what we did was we put a freezer aboard our boat and bought into some freezer systems. We do piece by piece here to make sure, we don't go into too much debt or anything like that in this business especially. We have continued to help other people trying to find higher prices than what peeled shrimp can actually be bought for. We've seen a lot of stuff happen with the economy, and people are losing jobs, and it's going to be hard times for some of them. And down here in our bayou areas, people can live off the land, and they'll hit hard times, but they'll make it through it. They'll persevere. So one thing, it's a very resilient community. You'll find in the bayou areas for sure.
One of the biggest islands they had around here in Blackman Parish was Britain Island. You could see that island full trees and mangos and big island. It would have taken you half a day with a troll boat to make a run at that island. Now, right now, I think
it's a sandbar.
It's a sandbar, just a little unreal. If you would have seen that island about 50 years, 60 years ago, how big that was. Could go in the back of that and put your anchor. You was out the weather. Now the whole island is gone. Same thing in Tambalier. I don't know how many islands that just vanished away.
I can bring you some places where I was a kid. We used to go fishing while we just shrimping with my father-in-law in the lakes. They had land, that's all gone. Islands, that's not there no more. It's a big loss, and every time we get a storm, you see, while you're dragging, you see parts of the marsh floating by. I mean, we're losing land about a minute.
When you look at our wetlands, they become an exceptionally important aspect to the process of decaying of vegetative matter. And the shrimp are not necessarily after the decaying vegetation. They're after the microbes that are on that decaying vegetation as they pass it through their gut. You have white shrimp that are more of an omnivore type of species, where they'll eat on the detritus directly, or any little worm or crab they can get as well. But they'll utilize the microbes, things like bacteria, fungi, protozoa, on the detrital material, this decomposing plant marsh material, for food. In the case of the brown shrimp, what you have is that their feeding is more of a carnivorous type of feeding. So brown shrimp are more carnivores, we believe, than white shrimp. And in the case of the brown shrimp, they're after the small worms and little other critters in the mud. But those critters are after the detritus. So it all comes back to the importance of that connection between wetlands as it goes through its annual cycle of growth and dying in the wintertime, and eventually with tides in the spring and in the fall, exporting some of this to the water, to the estuaries and the bays. It helps to complete that cycle to enrich the estuaries.
In years before now, there was a characteristic. The shrimp population had a staging effect. And in other words, they came out of the wetland areas, the marshes, and they stayed for about 2 weeks to 3 weeks in the large coastal open bays, Lake Pelto, Barataria Bay, Terrebonne Bay. But with the breaking up of our coastal landscape, the large open bays have gotten much bigger, and in some cases it's the Gulf. When the shrimp come out of the marsh, they're virtually in the Gulf now, and there's no longer this staging effect. The shrimp move offshore very soon after they come out of the marshes.
When you look at wetlands, estuaries, coastal wetlands and estuaries, there's a very significant correlation between fishery production, both commercial and recreational, with the amount of wetlands you have and the amount of estuaries you have combined together. And when you look at the fact that Louisiana has roughly 25 to 40% of coastal wetlands in the U.S., and you look at our fisheries, the two go hand in hand, most definitely.
We have most of the coastal wetlands in the United States. The Barataria-Terrebonne system is the most productive of estuaries. It's first in shrimp, first in a large number of fishery species. It produces much more than all of the natural estuaries.
Coastal land loss is probably the #1 issue relative to the long-term sustainability of the commercial fishery in Louisiana. I will say, however, that land loss probably temporarily stimulated production of shrimp in Louisiana, along with other estuarine organisms such as crabs and certain species of fish.
It's an unusual characteristic of wetland loss that it produces more shrimp initially. You see, there's a biological concept called the edge effect.
As the marsh broke up, it actually created more habitat for juvenile shrimp. Juvenile shrimp typically reside in shallow marsh ponds rather than open bays and lakes. So as the marsh broke up, it created more habitat. In addition, as we lost marsh, it introduced more decaying plant material, which is the basis of the estuarine food chain, into the system.
You reach a point where as the marsh continues to fragment, eventually you lose that marsh. And you can get into the literature, scientific literature, and back in the mid-90s, after about a true decade to 15 years of documenting very well how we were losing our marshes, that by the mid-90s you began to see publications dealing with how wetlands are linked with shrimp production, and the doom and gloom that perhaps by sometime in the first decade of this century, we might see a significant decline in shrimp production, assuming that there was a very definite correlation between shrimp production and wetlands. And we can see that correlation. But at the same time, as the wetlands deteriorate, we don't know yet where that point is between loss of wetlands and still having maybe shallow, very shallow waters that can still offer a degree of protection when they burrow in. Where is that fine line between when you begin to see no more wetlands or very little wetlands, you begin to see a decline not only in shrimp but other fisheries as well?
Many marine biologists and scientists have predicted that eventually land loss will reach such critical rates that important habitat for juveniles will begin to decrease.
We fully expect the shrimp population to crash once all of the wetlands are broken up and turned to open water. There's no real time period by which we say the shrimp population will begin to decrease. We think that it's that time period right now where the shrimp will be decreasing, shrimp populations will be decreasing from now on.
I don't understand this season at all. Usually, this time of the year, while we're strolling today, when the current is down, that's when we usually catch our shrimp. And this year, when the current is down, they don't have no shrimp.
Brown shrimp season, the shrimp was a small shrimp, 800 with big white shrimp, 16 20s. Right now, for the opening of this season, we're seeing 16 20s and you're seeing like 36, 40, 40, 50s.
This is one of the worst shrimp years also. It was a bad brown shrimp season. We just come from the opening trip of the white shrimp season, and it was not very good. We made a little money, but everybody I spoke with said this was one of the worst white shrimp seasons they've seen so far. So we're just starting the white shrimp. We have to go from now, which is August, all the way to December on white shrimp. And if it's a bad start right now, what's going to happen as we get toward Christmas? You know, it's, I don't know. It's very scary.
I was 16 and had never shrimp before in my life. I finished growing up, you could say, on the back deck of a shrimp boat. A lot of it's family-oriented. Wives and husbands, children and grandchildren. Grandchildren shrimp with their grandparents, and my kids go shrimping with Doug's sister Sonia and their nanny, which is on the captain's boat. And we just came out here, and it was just, you know, an awesome opportunity to learn a new thing and a new trade for me, especially. I didn't know how it operated, and I remember having piles of shrimp on this back deck, and it's like, you know, how do you go about it? So we had some little benches we got on our little benches and started 3Aing the shrimp and picking out the shrimp, and that's what's good about our industry. It's passed on from generation to generation to generation. My husband is a 4th generation shrimper. It's who we are. It's part of our life, especially in Lafourche and the Bayou region, Terrebonne, and you know the surrounding coastal parishes, Plaquemines and Jefferson. It's part of our culture. It's part of who we are. It's our heritage. It's part of Louisiana's makeup. You know, what would our bayous look like without a shrimp boat tied up in the bayou? You know when the May season's opening, because come April, you'll see everybody working on their boats, painting their boats, and it's usually an exciting time. Oh, I'm gonna go get them shrimp. You know, everybody's excited about it. In the last few years, that excitement of getting your boat ready and going out shrimping has somewhat declined because we know what we're facing.
It's over 2 years this boat thing goes shrimping because can't get a crew to run it, and my grandson says that you know, not only that, the cash cannot pay for the expense on the boat, so boat is just tied up.
If the people think it's important enough to keep it, they need to support the fishermen by eating the locally caught fish, shrimp, crab, crawfish. You know, and it is a better product. Once you eat something good and fresh, it's amazing.
Shrimp better than the Louisiana shrimp.
Oh man,
wild shrimp, I might say.
But in this neighborhood, they're partial to the mom and dad shrimp because when it comes in, they get it fresh off the boat. The fish, the shrimp. They have a little peeling contest, and they fillet that fresh, you know, those fish, the flounders and the channel mullets that we keep. I think myself, the product that I produce is second to none. I catch a good shrimp, a quality shrimp. I take care of my shrimp. I sell it fresh, and I say, once you eat my shrimp, you'll never eat another one again. And it's not just mine. It's all the shrimp that comes out the Barataria, but I'm more partial to mine.
You're not going to find no better shrimp than the shrimp that is produced in the United States of America. And of course, we love Louisiana shrimp.
The shrimp industry is to the South Louisiana, or to the Bayou Acadians, what the oil is to a lot of other people. It's a way to make a lifestyle. And nobody gets rich, but everybody gets enough money to keep body and soul together over a period of time. And it's a tradition that is because of increasing international pressures, international trade, and developments that's really changing. Louisiana is one of the major providers of shrimp to the United States, but like everything else, world competition has become the problem. Shrimping is a dying institution because of the cost of fuel, the cost of boat, the cost of insurance, and the lack of income as a result of the shrimp.
In 2007, approximately 114 million pounds of shrimp were harvested with a dockside value of about $145 million. The Department of Wildlife and Fisheries just funded an economic survey and study of the impacts of different fisheries on the economics of the state, and they found that the commercial shrimp industry had a net overall impact of $1.28 billion and 14,000 jobs.
When you look at the shrimp industry in Louisiana, you have to understand that it's probably the biggest, commercially speaking, by value in the Northern Gulf. About 75% of the value comes from our shrimp industry. The Northern Gulf contributes about a third to 40% of lower 48 landings in a given year. So it's no small potatoes. It's a major seafood area, and the main reason is the Mississippi River. The problem they're facing is an economic problem. It's more than a wetland loss problem. It's more than a hurricane problem. It basically comes down to imports and the cost structure of those imports and how much cheaper they are to the consumer compared to the price that a shrimper in Louisiana has to obtain in order to break even.
Imported shrimp really sets the pace of the price. Over 80% of shrimp we consume in the United States is imported. A downgrade on the price of the shrimp from the imports with the influx from these Asian countries really, I guess, 2003, maybe a little bit before that, and the price of the shrimp was just, it was kind of just, it was depressed about it, you know? 10, 12, 14 years ago, these South American countries started these pond-raised shrimp. And that kind of depressed the price for a few years, but then it looked like the price had came back. But consumption picked up with shrimp in the United States, which made the demand better also.
Similar to a lot of industries, agriculture, manufacturing, service industries, the cost structure that American businesses have, regulatory factors have caused imports to be a favorable option. So we have imported shrimp from Southeast Asia, Central America. This is aquaculture shrimp. And there's been trade actions to try and limit the amount of imported shrimp and lessen the harm to domestic shrimp harvesters. But those are very difficult to put in place and usually only temporary measures. So what we've seen in the last 20 years is the price of shrimp, if you graph it, is pretty much steady. It's been anywhere from $1.50 to $2 a pound, and actually going down from there some recently.
I can show you receipts from 20 years ago when I first started running the boat. I was probably getting actually more money for the shrimp on certain grades than I am right now.
Try living on your paycheck from 30 years ago and live in today's world. It's virtually impossible for these people. How they survive this long, they're a very resilient group of people, you know.
But when you adjust for inflation, what you're finding is that 20 years ago, that $2 that you got for a pound of shrimp at the dock actually had about $4 worth of purchasing power in 2005 dollars. So when you adjust for inflation, you're looking at about half the spending power that you get for that same price.
All the imported shrimp is, we just can't compete with them. They can hire labor for $1 a day or whatever they're paying the labor. They go and collect the shrimp ponds, and we can't operate at that, you know. We're dealing with fuel costs of almost $4 a gallon, and everything else is going up.
In 1998, we had a brief period there where diesel prices were less than $1 per gallon. After Katrina and Rita, they were 3 times that. After Gustav, they were 4 times that. Now they've come down a little bit, but they're still 3 times higher than they were just a decade ago.
First it started with the price of the shrimp, but they were still able to survive. But now the diesel, it's really gonna take its toll on it this year. And because of the see, the diesel last summer was $1.75.
Either you can't pay your operating costs, fuel, labor, fixed costs for retiring debt, or you have to catch so much shrimp that you're literally filling the boat to the gunnels with shrimp just to break even. That in turn can actually cause additional downturns in price because you're flooding the market with tremendous amounts of shrimp.
And let's say a 40-50 could be $2 a pound, which would be a good price, which we can't get at this moment, which I got 8 years ago. Believe it or not, we can't get this price right now. And you can leave the dock and say, I'll be back in a week. It could be $1.50. It could actually drop that much, 50, 60 cents, you know. It could drop. So you're leaving out thinking, well, I can catch this much shrimp and make this much money. You come in, and you don't have that much money.
I've seen people break down and cry when I gave them that check. You know, it's something sad to see, I tell you. And it's to be proud to be in this business, and it's just survival now. That's all it is survival.
For those individuals who say, well, we're being driven out, I always say it would be a great opportunity for you to try something new that would be related to this that science has provided you an insight to, such as aquaculture. And that's a tremendous, then that way you cut down everything. And we don't know, foreign shrimp that are coming in, we don't know exactly where they were caught, what sort of pollutants might be in them. We periodically see with a lot of this. And so these individuals who began shrimping first with a cast net and then had a schooner that they was wind powered with a little net behind it, and eventually now get into a motorized craft, they simply have to make the adaptations that their forefathers made.
One of the questions that often comes up is, why don't we just raise shrimp ourselves? And why don't we do what they're doing in Southeast Asia or Central America or any other part of the world that's producing estuarine-based aquaculture shrimp? And there have been attempts to do that in South Carolina, Texas, even Louisiana over the last 20, 30 years. There's a couple of big problems we run into. I mentioned earlier that we have labor costs, which are 10 times higher. We pay $5 an hour, they pay $5 a day. But there's also regulatory constraints. In the United States, we have Coastal Zone Management Act laws that require coastal use permits or anything that would impact the natural coastal zone in a negative way. And because the engineering of a shrimp farm requires that you develop it in an estuarine area, you could impede the ingress and egress, or the natural traffic of larval wild fisheries in and out of the estuary. And because of that concern, it's virtually impossible to get permits to cordon off large multi-thousand acre areas of coastal Louisiana and use the natural productivity of the area to produce shrimp. I would venture to say that some of the countries that have seen large-scale conversion of their estuaries, of their mangrove estuaries into shrimp production, will in the long run probably realize some costs that they didn't see up front to their natural fisheries, to their natural productivity, to the diversity of their habitat. In fact, many of them have already seen that, and they're moving their shrimp farms further inland. So could we see this in the United States? It's not impossible, but I do think it'd be very, very difficult because of existing regulatory constraints and, of course, the cost of doing business here, which is much, much higher.
You have a tremendous decrease in amount of boats, I guess, from 2005 through 2008. I'm telling you, just what we had in 2007 was 50% less people that was unloading their shrimp with us than they had in 2005 before Katrina.
I'd say that the business probably peaked around 2000. That's when they had about the most boats in the business. And right now, I'd say there's only 80%. There's 80% of the fleet that is gone. I mean, completely. People sold the boats, just got out of the business. So you have 20% of the fleet of just 8 years ago. It's unbelievable.
In the shrimp pass, if they didn't have 200 boats a moon, they didn't have not one years ago. We used to have wrecks and all, boats hitting each other and all, trying to maneuver their whirlpools and all. Now, cars up, we catch a little bit. The minute cars die down, it plays out to nothing. That's why you see, well, so how many boats was out there? Huh? One, us.
Everybody I know that left shrimping and is doing something else, they all want to come back. They didn't get out of shrimping because they wanted to get out of shrimping. They got out of shrimping because it was better for their family, you know. And everyone I see somewhere, man, they just come, they hug me, they miss it, you know, they just miss it.
Fishermen have learned how to adapt. I mean, if you look at back in the 40s, 1940s, particularly after World War II, when we began to see truly mechanization, big engines, bigger boats, everything was the trawl fishery in terms of using the boards, the otter trawl. You began to see a gradual shift into eventually butterfly nets, and then in the late 80s, mid-80s, you began to see the skimmers being developed. And it was just a way of getting the shrimp before somebody else gets the shrimp.
Cajun culture is shrimping. Shrimping is very, very important to local people, not only the fishermen, but also the public. Most of the residents along the coast buy shrimp or eat shrimp at restaurants or may trawl recreationally for shrimp. It's just part of the lifestyle and culture that we enjoy in South Louisiana. And the economics of the fishery is very important, but the culture, while you can't quantify it, the importance is there.
We need to rebuild not in a geologic time period, but we need to build the wetlands back now. It's not about one particular habitat. They're all important. The ridges, the wetlands, the marshes, the swamps, the barrier islands, it's all important, but we need to get far more serious and build substantial amounts of wetlands and coastal landscape. We need to start that very soon if we're going to succeed, because there's a point beyond which it's going to be too late. The resulting loss of this culture will be the greatest tragedy of all.
I live in the most awesome community, to me, in the whole United States. I wouldn't rather live anywhere else. Because this community, when there's a need, they pull together.
It's the life history of this place. You know, the economy used to go according to the shrimping, not no more, but when they had a bad season, things were bad. Everybody said it was bad, you know, but evidently it ain't important enough, because we keep losing it. It's practically gone. I feel people come to Louisiana expecting to eat a Louisiana product. People need to want to eat locally, eat domestic. You know, you gotta ask for it. Look, I want that Louisiana shrimp, or whatever coastal state you're in.
That's what I was born with, and raised shrimp. I try working on crew boats, try working on offshore tugs. I try carpenter work, make good money, but I'm not happy. I'm not happy with it. That's what we like to do, me and my wife. Like the troll, you know. My grandson in front of me, that's the 5th generation shrimper. It looks like he'll be the last.
I don't know what I do, you know. I just don't want to do nothing else, you know. Just don't want to do nothing else. This is what I love doing, and like I said, everybody I meet up with that got out, they just miss it, man. They you know, they got tears in their eyes, man.
You gotta love to do it. I mean, it's a good job, and I'm gonna tell you what's the drawing when you make a good trip and you catch that, boy, you're all excited. You want to go back out and make another good trip, or when you're out there, you catch a shrimp, you put that drag on the deck, and you got all them shrimp jumping all over. You're excited, you're running all over. You want to hurry up, put back overboard, get back in the shrimp. It's like a rush.
My father told me when I was starting with him on the boat, he said, son, I'm going to tell you something about shrimping. When you have a shrimp boat, every day is Monday. You don't want to leave the dock, you want to stay with your family, but the shrimp are hitting, they're all there, you have to go catch your share. To do it for 31 years, it's still just as hard to leave that first day as it was back then. And once you get out there, it's not quite as bad. And when you're coming in, it's a great feeling.
It was a tight family unit, you know. How many people can say they worked with their brothers, and then all the siblings worked together, all the cousins? You know, it was family all the time.
If one would catch shrimp 2-3 miles away, or 10 miles away, get news to the other guy.
Come, got shrimp.
I won't stop. As long as I can, I will. I still got that hope that it will change. You know, it will change.
Captain Stevens said it's in our blood. Yeah, go back shrimping.
If I ventured in the slipstream between the viaducts of your dream, where mobile steel rims crack and the ditch and the back road stop, could you find me? Or would you kiss my eyes, laying you down? Silence easy to be born again, to be born again. From the far side of the ocean, if I put the wheels in motion, then I stand with my arms behind me and push another door. Could you find me? Would you kiss my eyes, lay me down? In silence easy to be born again, to be born again. There you go, standing with the look of avarice, talking to Heath Ledbetter, showing pictures on the wall, whispering in the hall. I'm pointing a finger at me. There you go, there you go, standing in the sun, darling, with your arms behind you and your eyes before. There you go, taking care of your boy. Seeing that he's got clean clothes, putting on his little red shoes. Seeing that he's got clean clothes, putting on his little red shoes, pointing a finger at me. Standing in your side rest, trying to do my very best, looking straight at you, coming through, darling. If I ventured in the slipstream between the viaducts of your dream, where a mobile steel rims crack and the ditch in the back road stop, could you find me? Would you kiss my eyes and lay me down in silence, easy to be born again, to be born again, to be born again, to be born again. In another world, darling, in another world, in another time, got a home on high. Ain't nothing but a stranger in this world. I'm nothing but a stranger in this world. I got a home on high in another land, so far away, so far away. We up in the heaven, we up in the heaven, we up in the heaven. In another time, in another phase.